All right, hi everybody. I am going to go over chapters 1.5, 1.1 through 1.5 in this video, and then I will post another one next week with 1.6 through 1.10 just to sort of flesh out the information in the first section. And just to make sure you have a good grasp of it and you're ready to write your um, formal analysis, which is about these chapters. All right, so the elements of art and the principles of art are the things that this section covers. The elements of art are the building blocks of art, all the things you use to make a work of art or to look at when you're talking about a work of art. And then the principles of art are really the way that the elements are used or organized. And to give a very simple example of this, shape is one of the elements. All right, if you repeat a shape, then you would have made the principle of repetition. If you put them in a certain order, you will have the principle of pattern. All right, so shape makes pattern, or you use shape to make pattern. So one goes with the other one, but the elements are really the building blocks, and then the principles are the way that those are used. All right, and we'll get back into two-dimensional art in the future. All right, so line, everything starts with line, whether you're making a drawing or a painting or a sculpture or anything or looking at something, you're dealing with line because line really sort of describes or makes the things that we see in the visual world. All right, so a line, it connects 2 points. I like to think of it more as a moving point that either stops or connects and makes a shape. So you put your pencil down, you drag it across the page, ta-da, you've made a line. All right, if you curve it all around, like here in the sand, the Peruvian sand pile, you curve it all around, ta-da, you've made a shape of a spider. All right, so lines define shapes, or they're just on their own. They can be, lines that don't connect, they just create direction or movement. So in real life, we see the edges of things, right? Not people, not some objects like a vase, but certainly when you have like horizontal structures like this, you'll see lines that connect and make shapes. All right, but you have even in 3D things. So these are vertical lines, diagonal lines move us into Santo Spirito, and then we have horizontal lines here. All right, so all types of directional lines. And if you're making a drawing or painting, anything that has an edge of something, you will have to make a line to show that edge of something. Right? That's kind of what drawing is. If you only use an outline on something, we call that a contour line or a contour drawing. All right, the artist Matisse, and there's a lovely Picasso in your chapter, like to use just lines to make things. It sort of gives it this whimsical, light effect. Implied lines are lines that the artist doesn't actually make, but he makes a series of marks to make it seem as if there is a line. So what happens is the viewer has to do the work and connect the lines, right? Such as all of these letters are like dashes, and then you have all these dots lined up. So those are lines. We can see our eye connects them as lines, but they're not lines. This is a giant implied line here. And then, of course, there's all these actual lines that are thick and thin. Right? This is a great example of how line can move you through a work of art. Right? When we look at something, maybe we're looking at this guy first or this guy. And then these lines connect everything that we kind of go through the work to see, right? And we may even see these letters secondary to what is going on right in front of us. All right, lines, I put this on the Santo Spirito, right? But this is also a good example of how lines can sort of dictate the composition. Right? The content or subject of this is these two guys, and they should, of course, be the most important things to think about. But these vertical elements and then this slash across the page sort of hold us into the work of art. They stabilize it, but also create a dynamic effect. And dynamic effects are what animation or comic art is all about, right? If you use a diagonal, you'll immediately create movement either to or into or away from something, all right? And then that's an easy way to catch somebody's attention or to create a lot of energy in a work of art. Right, this is one of your gateways, the 8 works that will repeat in the book if you read the introduction to the book. In this case, we're going to look at Frida Kahlo. We'll look at her again, but she has these horizontals, right? One of them's actual, and then she has sort of these implied horizontals by everything sort of lining up. Of course, it's a mirror image of her, sort of. Right, so in a crazy way, it creates this stability and with the chaos all in the background. All right, if you took the inquisitive, you probably saw this question. Lines can be regular, irregular, and expressive, right? This is very chaotic. It expresses some kind of like energy that is, whether you see it as positive or negative, right? And then most artists use a series of irregular, expressive, regular lines, diagonals, horizontals, verticals, right? A good work of art usually has a lot of variety in it of all of the elements. All right, the second element is shape. Shape is a two-dimensional thing. It has height or length and width, right? Like a box. This is a two-dimensional shape that has something on it, value, we'll talk about in a second, that makes it appear to be three-dimensional. But by nature, shapes themselves are just a line connected, enclosing space, and that's a shape. Shapes can be geometric and organic. Geometric, we have words for: square, circle, triangle, hexagon, rhombus, whatever your favorite geometric shapes are. And then organic things we don't always have names for. We call them like something in nature. So organic, you've seen it in the grocery store, it's something found in nature or all natural. We usually say it looks like a flower, it looks like a clover, it's a cloud shape, but we don't really have names for them like geometric. We say they look like natural things where they're just kind of blobs. And then like Miriam Shapiro, the artist, used organic shapes. And then, of course, a lot of architecture, not all, is very geometric. Just like lines, shapes can be implied. That means the viewer has to do the work, connect it. Right? And sometimes an artist wants the viewer to sort of look at something and think about it and stay on the image for a second, whether it's because it's implied line and they're figuring it out, or just because they're advertising something and they want somebody to remember an image. All right, contrast is actually one of the principles. We'll get back to that next chapter, but this is just to show that, just like I said, variety with line. An artist might use contrast to make a nice amount of things. So this has a nice contrast of dark and light, of geometric and organic shapes. Of course, people are organic shapes. It has big solid shapes here, vertical lines, etc. All right, positive and negative. A positive shape is an actual object. The negative shape is the area around, through, or in something. Right, so if you're looking at, say, like a table, the table is the object, and then all the space in between the legs and around the whole table, that's the negative shape. All right, and in this case, Andre the Giant's face is positive, and then the areas around him are negative. All right, chapter 2, or 1.2, talks about three-dimensional art. So form, that's the word we use for three-dimensional things. It has volume and mass. The Sphinx and the pyramid have both, right? They take up a lot of area and then they have real solid mass, like they have weight to them. All right, and then this is to show like this is what volume is like the area in something, right? The amount of space it takes up, whether it's full or not, and then mass is the space is actually full. All right. And then this is just to show that mass can be used by an artist to sort of create some kind of feeling of permanence or some heaviness to the work of art. I love that picture. All right, forms can be geometric, such as David Smith's sculpture here, just all geometric forms, just, I like to say, stuck together. They're welded together. All right, and then anything with humans, of course, flowers, these are organic. So organic and geometric forms. This is an organic form. Shout out to my old city of Chicago. This is downtown Chicago, the Cloud Gate. All right, so it's an organic form, but texture can sometimes play a very important part of a work of art, especially three-dimensional. If something's gigantic, an artist has to really consider a lot of things. All right, so this is a metallic material that obviously creates a very smooth texture and reflects the whole city, right? Which is kind of the point. But the other point, whether the artist meant it or not, I'll tell you because I've been here a million times. The other point really is that people can see themselves in the Cloud Gate. You can see everybody's really just, all these people are waiting to take their own picture. If you walk in here, it's like a kaleidoscope. You can see yourself like 6 times under there. It's pretty cool. But really, it's funny. It reflects the city, but really it reflects you in the city. All right, and then the Oppenheimer piece here, the gift. You can see texture is a very important thing. Maybe not to evoke a very nice feeling. All right, 1-3, we're going to talk about value, space, and perspective. So here we're going to get into two-dimensional art, which has length and width or height, trying to seem as if it has that third dimension, which is depth. All right, so even though this is just a flat drawing, or I guess this is computer generated, right? There's the shape, but now it looks 3D because this is popped in there, this oval, so it makes it look like a shadow, which makes this look like a surface, and then it looks as if light is hitting it. So value is the amount of light and dark in a work of art. All right, and it creates interest as well as depth, right? It makes it like not things that are flat. Sometimes an artist wants it to look that way, but a lot of times the illusion of 3 dimensions is what makes something interesting. All right, so you have all these different browns here, and it looks as if the light is hitting this here, nice and smooth texture. All right, and then this is Henri Magritte, a French artist, and this means this is not a pipe. He was being ironic. Of course, value can be important, and we looked at Cloud Gate to a giant form. Of course, if you're going to, make something like this, you really have to consider like how is light going to affect it? How deep should these be? How fat should these triangles be? What will it look like at all different angles? All right, so value is important for 3-dimensional things, as I said about this, but really we're going to talk about 2-dimensional. Oops, I think I need to go here just to emphasize this. Value can have high contrast, medium, or low. So this is sort of, I would say a high medium. They have very light lights and darker darks, but it's not super dramatic. It's not light though. This also is sort of medium value. With this term chiaroscuro, and we'll talk more about this when we talk about Baroque art in our art history chapter, talks about light that is, the Italian word is light dark, meaning it's mostly just light and dark, and there's no in-betweens. It's like severely dramatic light. So this is chiaroscuro in the Baroque art, and there's that diagonal I was talking about as a dynamic composition. And you can see it's just this raking light where it's like all the faces are just lit up, and then lots of things are in shadow. You can't really even see what's going on in some areas. All right, so that's chiaroscuro. Hatching and cross-hatching are techniques that artists use to make the value. All right, so if you've ever done some pen and ink drawings, you know that you can't just blend it light to dark like that sphere I showed. You have to create spaces in between the lines to make the value. Make them closer together, they're dark, further apart, they're light. All right, that's just techniques. Tonal blending is what we call regular shading, usually if you take art classes, if you're an art major. And that just means it goes smoothly light to dark, cast shadows. It's blended. It's not like lines or something. All right, space. When we create space in a work of art, sometimes it's small amount of space and sometimes it is giant areas of space. All right, so we use these terms like size, overlapping, and position. And what this is referring to is, I'm going to talk about the Sphinx and the pyramid as two-dimensional because we're really looking at a photograph. In general, when we look at sculpture or architecture, we're talking about the thing, not the photograph. But in this case, I'll just talk about this because it's clear that this is overlapping, right? The Sphinx is here. You know that the Sphinx doesn't, or the pyramid doesn't get cut off here and they're wedged together. You understand that this is way behind this. All right. And you understand that this structure is in front of the Sphinx. All right. So that's overlapping. And then size. Well, this is in the background because in real life, this is much, 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 much bigger than the Sphinx. All right. This is an odd example because the pyramid doesn't get that much smaller in the background. But you understand, like if somebody's way on the edge of, say, a football field, and they look tiny, right? You can hold out your hand up and you can, see they're like 3 inches big, right? You don't think that that's the world's smallest person. You understand like they're far away and they look really small to me. And as they walk towards me, they're going to get bigger and bigger till they're life size right next to me. All right, so overlapping size and position. When something is two-dimensional, so again, we're talking about this as a photograph, things that are lower on the page, which are this structure here, those things are always closest to us. And then it proceeds back in space as you go up the page. So then we have the foreground, these are closest, middle ground, this is second, and then this is in the background. And you can see it's way up on the composition, the page here. All right, so this is in real life too. Like if you look out a window, things sort of like compress and you can see the lower things are closer, the further things are higher up. That is the way we see things compressed in an area of space, like a picture plane. Perspective is how things systematically seem to go back in space. All right, so there's atmospheric, isometric, and linear. Atmospheric is simple. When things are far away, they are not as clear. Whether it's actual atmosphere like haze that makes them sort of disappear, or whether it's our eyesight. We can't see details very far away like we can see up close. All right, so that's atmospheric perspective. Isometric is just when you're looking at something at a certain angle, you see different angles of it. So here we see the rooftops and the sides of the building, and we're looking down at the people. All right, it's much like this. These are isometric drawings on a computer. Linear perspective is a little bit different, developed in the Italian Renaissance, which we'll cover. And it's based on observation, but it's also very mathematical. All right, this is one-point perspective. Leonardo da Vinci did not invent one-point perspective, but all of these lines seem to converge to one point. All right, like all the windows, all the lines up here, and it's right behind this head here. We'll talk more about this in the future. All right, so 1 point, everything goes to 1 point. And 2 point, everything goes to 2 different points, meaning if you're on a street corner and you're looking at the building at the corner, then you see 2 different streets go down back in 2 directions. That is 2-point perspective. Foreshortening is when everything comes or goes very quickly in a short amount of space so that things look very distorted. And that is a very hard angle. If you've done a drawing or a painting of a person and their arms coming right at you or their leg, even somebody sitting in a chair with their knees facing you, that can be a very challenging angle, right? Because things get very distorted and the scale starts to change from what we expect, right? So here, Superman's fist is as big as his head because his fist is much closer to us. So now we have that scale thing. Closer is bigger and further. All right. And again, though, it creates all these angles and distortions that create all this dynamic movement in this work of art. This is perfect for comic books. All right. Color is probably the thing that attracts your attention most in a work of art if it has a lot of color. And it's also the most personal response that people have to color. All right. This is a basic color wheel with 12 colors, but obviously there's millions of colors. If you've ever gone to Home Depot and thought you're going to paint your wall blue today, you are going to have a big decision ahead of you when you get to the paint store. All right. Because just a drop of white or more blue in something, say blue-green here, well, just like a half a drop of blue makes it a whole different color. So the color wheel really is like infinite. But we always break it down to the most simple things. Of course, when I'm teaching studio art classes, we have to have some basic things. All right. So primary colors, red, blue, yellow. Secondary colors, orange, green, violet, or purple. If you mix two primaries, you get a secondary. If you mix a secondary and a primary, you get a tertiary color. All right. If this were a studio class, we'd go on and on about this, but you don't really need to know how to mix them. You just need to know how to recognize them and how they are used. So Kandinsky's painting here, yellow, red, blue, in case you didn't notice that that's what they're made of. He titled it that. All right. He sticks with the basic primary colors to make his work of art. All right. They kind of clash against each other. He's dulled some down with mixing in blacks and whites. So it's not too clashy, but or have a lot of contrast. But he does it because those are colors that work together in a certain way that they create some kind of vibrant contrast. And this really is the thing you want to pay attention to when you're looking at artwork is has the artists use colors for a certain reason, or are they just representational? Like in a lot of cases, the artist wants to make the color faithful to the thing that they are painting, right? Like a skin tone will be skin tone. Andy Warhol wanted to make skin green, pink, red. All right. So did a lot of other artists, so that he would take color combinations that go against each other. All right. So some things create contrast, but these colors here are the three that kind of are, and these are just two versions of them: red and green, blue and orange, yellow and purple. These are complementary colors. Complementary colors are across from each other on the color wheel, and that means they are the most contrast against each other. And I bet you can think of a lot of sports teams and logos or holidays that use these three combinations, and that is because they're very graphic. They create contrast and they're eye-catching. People remember them. So it's always good for commercial art to use those kinds of things. And that's why Andy Warhol, and we'll talk about this in pop art, used the same thing. Right? He created contrast. This isn't his. This is like some strange thing based on his about how to wear makeup. This is a painting that uses green and red in the sky to create this almost like awe-inspiring sky. All right, by Church. And then Mary Cassatt used analogous colors, which do the opposite. They don't clash, they match. Analogous, like if you make an analogy to something, you make it similar to something else. So these are colors that are similar, like the same family on the color wheel. So we have blue, yellow, green, right? Yellow and blue make green. So these are all the same color family, and then blues and blacks mixed in, with the exception of the skin tones. It's almost all the same variation of different colors. Or monochromatic, if you really want to make things match, you can use mono means one, chroma means color, one color plus black and white. So artists like Picasso in his blue or rose period, not truly monochromatic, we'll look at that, but similar. And then this artist here, Mark Tansey, used a lot of monochromatic color schemes. So it creates like a certain effect, like it's kind of surreal in a way, or photographic. This is a painting. All right, and then artists find ways to use colors together for an effect on the eye, almost like an optical, um, not op art because we're going to look at op art, but like an optical illusion in your mind that they sort of like cross over and mix to make like almost like this maroonish color here and like a yellow orange color here. Sometimes they just kind of vibrate off the eye. All right, and Georges Seurat also experimented with color. We'll look at him with the idea of not mixing the color yourself or blending it, but putting one color next to another so that the eye would mix them. And then, of course, the symbolic use of color is an important thing. And this is pretty subjective. An artist can only use the colors that they think reflect a certain emotion, but whether you feel it or not, that's for you. Same thing with this as psychology. There are studies, but obviously I want you to look at the art and have your own reactions. So here we have Van Gogh's painting, and you can see he used the complementary colors red and green over and over again, and then that weird garish like minty color mixed in that he kind of put it everywhere so that it creates almost this glowing effect. And then he did these implied lines here around the lamps. So it's very off-putting in a way. It's like there's a lot going on in Van Gogh if you want to write about him for his for your analysis. And then his frenemy here, we'll talk about them. Gauguin also used yellow in a different way. His is symbolic to me, more like Jesus is glowing. He's the center of the picture, and then everything else is sort of dulled down next to him, and they're very somber, of course, because of the scene. All right, and last we'll finish up with motion. Motion, you know what that means. It can either be implied because these are just still things, they don't have real motion, but two-dimensional artists making it look as if things are really moving, or a three-dimensional artist making a piece of sculpture, which is not easy, look like it is moving. He's not the first, though. All right, and we'll look at that in the future. And then, of course, there's op art I've referred to before. Don't stare at this, you'll get a headache. This is crazy. Imagine this on a giant scale in a museum. You feel like you're going to fall down, really. All right, so just the placement and then the colors used make this actually look like it's waving. And then some things really do move, like this giant sculpture by Alexander Calder. These are in museums all around the world. They actually move slowly, like as far as like if there's air conditioning or just moving air in a museum, these just slightly move calmly above you while you're looking at other artwork. He has these everywhere. These are mobiles, yes, just like children have over their cribs. He did it first, though. Some artists document time and motion like this. So this is stopped. This isn't a film. He did photographs to show the passage of time. It's also a very famous vase. You can read about that in your book. Spent a lot of money making that. Got in trouble. And then there's actually time-based art such as film. We won't really get into in this class, but obviously it is a giant art form out there, which has its own language. All right, we're going to leave off there. That is the end of 1.5. And then next week, again, I will do 1.6 through 1.10. I hope it helped you review. You have an exam coming up and you have the paper, so hopefully this helps.